right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Kelsey. I'm with CareStack. I'm one of the hosts here for this webinar tonight, also with Darby and Polaris, our co-hosts. We're excited to have you. If you've been with us for the previous webinars in this series, or if you're a first timer, welcome. This webinar tonight is titled Recruiting and Retaining Associates. And I'm going to be here as support for all of you attendees tonight. I'm going to get started here with Andrea from Darby. She has a few things she wants to share with everyone tonight. And then from there, we'll go into the presentation with Perrin. It's going to be about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A at the end. So with that, Andrea, I'll let you take over from here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Darby, it is my pleasure to also welcome you to this WebEx. We're very excited about the content that we've been sharing with that, well, through Parent Desports especially. We also have a number of other solutions for DSOs. And if there is any way we can help you, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, and we will make sure we get you to the right resource and skill set to help you with your business challenges. And with that, Perrin, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I appreciate you having me on this evening. Thanks to everybody for joining us. This is the disclosure page before we start the presentation, disclosing no financial relationships. And I, as your presenter, am also a co-owner of Polaris Healthcare Partners. Like Andrea said, and Kelsey, my name is Perrin Desports. You can see my background there. And Polaris is a firm that guides entrepreneurial dentists to build and ultimately exit successful group practices. So everything we do is focused in and around the group practice space, whether you're going from 1 to 2 locations, or 2 to 20 locations, or 20 locations to exit. We have some amount of resources that can probably help you in your journey along the way. You're going to find, for those who have not been on the first 4 sessions of this webinar series, it's a 7-part series. This is the 5th in the series. For those who haven't been on the first 4 sessions of it, these presentations are pretty thick. And when I say thick, I mean there's a lot of numbers. Hopefully there's a lot of detail, and hopefully you find it all to be very useful. If you'd like to download a copy, a PDF copy of this presentation, you can put your phone or tablet up to that QR code, scan it, and then fill out first name, last name, email address, or something like that, and download your own copy of the presentation to follow along with you. This presentation will be recorded if you'd like to see a playback of it, of course. So I'll give you a couple more seconds for those who want to download the presentation, and for those that don't or didn't get a chance to, there'll be the same QR code at the end of the presentation where you can download it at that point in time as well. So being a consultant in the group practice space, you know, let's face it, the dentistry as a profession has been through a lot in the last probably 2 decades or so, and a lot of that's driven by private equity-backed groups, enterprise-level DSOs. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs who happen to be dentists that want to own more than one location. And I get asked the question all the time, hey, Perrin, am I too late? Has the industry consolidated? Is there no more opportunity for growth? You know, is now the wrong time to be launching a group practice? And I'd say that you're not too late. Whether or not this is the right step for you is a different question. But in terms of market timing, the emerging and doctor-led group practice space, sort of that 2 to 10 location space, is still the fastest growing segment in all of dentistry, and it's been that way for a number of years. And literally, we see new groups coming to the fore, seemingly on every street corner of every city. So, you know, the old Chinese proverb of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now, is really right. If you wanted to build a group practice, arguably you probably should have started 10 to 20 years ago. But if you still want to, and it's the right step for you, then there's no reason that you should think that the time has passed you by. So I want to talk a little bit about associates in a couple of different ways tonight. And associate turnover is the biggest problem of every group practice. It doesn't matter whether you're 2 locations or you're 1,200 locations. That being said, there are going to be a large number of opportunities for you to bring on associates now and into the future. And here's what some of that may look like. The ADA studies a lot of this through their Health Policy Institute, HPI, and between roughly now and the next 15 years, there is going to be an increase in the number of dentists per capita per 100,000 from about 61.3 in 2025 up to about 67 in 2040. So there are going to be more young graduates graduating from dental school and entering the workforce. When the American Dental Education Association, ADEA, asked the dental school seniors of a year ago if they were mind ready or planned to join a DSO or group practice upon graduation. When they asked them that question 5 years ago, only about 12% said that they were mind ready to join a DSO. When they asked them that question last year, a full 30% said that they were. So this is a significant shift in the way that emerging graduates look at group practices and DSOs, and that bodes extremely well for all of us building group practices. I hate to put it this way, but once again, the American Dental Education Association, on their survey of school graduates from 2020, which is the last data I have on it, when they asked about the number who are graduating with what they call educational debt, over 81% responded that they did have some level of educational debt. And for those that did, the average was almost $305,000. And that is just a staggering number when you think about entering the workforce, potentially starting a family, buying your first home, maybe replacing an automobile, and also the prospects of buying or building your own practice. It's a daunting proposition. That's a large number, and that's one of the things probably that makes them mind ready to join a group practice. And of course, you know, as you would well imagine or be able to extrapolate from these numbers, those who are entering their prime earning years, ages 30 to 34, the number that own their own solo practice is down and down fairly dramatically from about a decade ago, from about almost 31% in 2011 to less than or just barely over 20% in 2021. So point being here, if you're building a group, you got to solve the biggest problem at hand, and that's associate turnover. But for those entering the workforce, their tailwinds behind you as it relates to the young people who are going to be entering the workforce. And there is going to be a wave of opportunity to hire a lot of associates in the coming years. And that's a trend that bodes really well for group practices. As I said, associate turnover is the #1 problem of every group practice in DSO. And when we think about the way to approach bringing associates into our businesses, a comprehensive solution really has 3 components to it. There's the recruiting piece on the front end. Like, you know, how do you recruit an associate? Do you just post an ad and hope somebody responds to it? Do you work with a recruiter? Do you just pray that somebody, trickles across your website? Or do you have some systematic approach to this? When you do get somebody that says, hey, I'd love to join your business, what does their first, 4 to 12 weeks look like? That's an onboarding period. Do you just simply greet them at the door on day 1 and say, here's a lab coat and a handpiece. You're going to be in Ops 3 and 4. Good luck and God bless. Or is there something more to it than that? And then for those that stay with you for any longer period of time, what is your development plan for them? Development primarily from a skill development standpoint, but also maybe from a leadership standpoint or from a interpersonal skills standpoint, case presentation especially. If you're going to solve the problem, you got to address all 3 of those. And all too often we see that people are just recruiting sheerly out of need and not really addressing the problem in a comprehensive way. So like I say, if you are planning on recruiting associates, the time to recruit associates is really not when you just fired one or had one quit on you. That is based on need. Having worked for Patterson Dental Supply for 15 years, I ran 3 different businesses for them. I hired a lot of people over that career, and I ran some pretty big businesses for the company. And I found that in our more prolific markets and in our larger branches, that recruiting was something that I focused on about a quarterly cycle basis, meaning it was constantly something where I was meeting with people, even if I didn't have any openings for them. And sometimes you'll find that the best people who are going to be the best fit for you are presently employed, and they may not be ready to leave that employer at this point in time, but things change in time, and you owe it to yourself to make that be a constant focus, and it should always be one of your top 3 priorities. So when we think about and we talk about recruiting, it's also important to look for or to think about what the associate himself or herself is actually looking for. And I would tell you that what they're looking for breaks down into 5 different components. One is certainly income. None of us work for free, and we all would rather get paid than not paid, and we rather have the opportunity to earn more pay for what we do. Associates are looking for certainty of income. I just mentioned they're carrying over $300,000 worth of student loan debt on average, and they're trying to start a family, buy a home, and they'd like to know that their income, while not guaranteed, is to some degree predictable. They want to know that they fit in, that yours is a place where they can bond with the team and the staff, and they feel like they belong. They want to improve their skills. None of you came out of dental school knowing what you know now. You probably had a mentor, or you may have taken a lot of CE courses on your own and learned how to do more complicated dentistry, learned how to do it at a faster rate, and you probably have grown your case acceptance rates over that period of time. Your associates are looking for the same thing, but they would rather learn it at a faster clip with somebody taking them under their wing. They want to be part of a winning team. Nobody joins a loser. Everybody wants to be part of something bigger than themselves. And if yours is a really good business that has a lot of really good growth opportunities for income and leadership and mentorship, that's appealing to a lot of young people. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're trying to solve this associate turnover problem without an ownership track, a partnership track, you're charging up a pretty steep hill. And I think the best solutions typically have some opportunity for ownership after some period of time. So the first key point here is to create certainty around their income, like I mentioned before. So let's take a look at this. What would you choose? Somebody that said, hey, we pay 35% of collections, or someone who said, we pay 30% of collections. And on average, our associates collect $700,000 in year 1, $800,000 in year 2, and $950,000 in year 3. And the average income for those first 3 years is $210,000, $240,000, and $285,000. If you have a solid business with a track record of historical performance, use that to create confidence in the person you're recruiting. Because if the competitor pays 35% of collections and the average associate collects $500,000, would you rather be with a business that pays 35% of $500,000 or 30% of $700,000? You can't spend a collection rate, but you can spend income. And if you're going to solve for certainty, this first point, you've got to relate it to what they're going to derive in terms of income, and that's only partially based on a clinical collection rate. So hopefully that makes sense. Key point number 2, create certainty around how they fit in. That's a 90-day onboarding plan, sometimes less than that, but the most of them that I see are about 90 days, with the meat of it being in the first 4 to 6 weeks, Let them see a copy of it and discuss what it means. What does their first day look like? What does their first week look like? How does it all break down? What are they going to be doing? Are they going to be shadowing somebody? Are they going to be mentored by somebody? Are they going to do some what if analogies on radiographs. I mean, how much time are they going to spend with the team? What's the average age and tenure of the team that's going to be supporting them? Your culture, what is it, and what does it mean to you? Same thing that can be said for core values. What are they, and why do they mean something to you? If core values and cultures don't mean anything to you, then don't expect it to mean anything to the people you're recruiting. And I'll tell you that the younger generation, core values and culture means an awful lot, and it's something that you should lead with in your recruiting process. Key point number 3, creating certainty around their skill development. Again, nobody comes out of dental school knowing everything, and hopefully those that you're going to be recruiting want to be a master at their craft. They want to get better. They want to get more proficient. They want to learn how to do more complicated treatment. And they've usually more recently just come out of an educational curriculum-based type of an environment. So if you have some type of skill development plan that's maybe broken down by, 6 to 12 month cycles or periods, lay that out to them. They're used to relating to things from an educational curriculum, and you can say that, building blocks A, B, and C in years 3, 4, and 5 look like this, and this. Show what the curriculum is, show what your outcome expectations are, and let them know if you're going to fund it, or if they're going to fund part of it, or if there's going to be some type of a holdback to compensate for it. People want to know how they can get better at what they do. And I hope that none of us would be recruiting anybody for our businesses that says, no, I'm fat and happy right now and I never want to get any better. That doesn't sound like a great candidate to me. So make sure you have some type of development plan, make sure it's documented, and make sure you can communicate it effectively. Key point number 4, create certainty around your winning team. That's the mission statement, the historical success that you've generated in your business through growth, whether it be expansion or revenue or complicated procedures or number of patients or Google 5-star reviews or anything along those lines that really connote the fact that yours is a winning team. Whatever that vivid vision is and the business outlook for the next 3 to 5 years on where you want to go and how you see them playing a role in that. People really do enjoy aspirational aspects of joining a business, and I think you can cater to that. Key point number 5, creating certainty around ownership, and that could be some level of traditional buy-in to your business or some type of an earn-in model. I'm going to take you through a high level of 2 different ones called restricted stock units and profits interest units. The key here, though, is that I believe dentists have always been and continue to be entrepreneurial in their mindset, and they choose to go to dental school over medical school because they want to be owners of businesses. And if you have some type of a program, a plan, a methodology that addresses those first 4 key points that I laid out, and you also have the ability to create ownership opportunities for these young people, then you're going to probably attract a higher level of candidate on the front end, and you're probably going to retain them for longer on the back end. And I think that's what you're trying to do. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at some context around traditional associate buy-ins. And as I mentioned in the onset, almost all of our work is in the group practice space. And it's a segment of the space we call doctor founded and debt funded. So we don't do a whole lot of work with private equity backed enterprise level DSOs. We really work with the people who are founder, owner, clinicians of their businesses, and they want to own more than one location. And they're probably going to be using bank funds to buy or build those locations. All right. So it's the entrepreneurs who happen to be dentists. And when we talk about an associate buy-in structure, the first thing you want, if this is the right solution, the first thing you want to think about is what you are trying to achieve. Is this a transition plan for you where you're going to gradually sell a solo practice maybe you're going to sell 50% of it now, or maybe it's 10% a year over the next 10 years or something like that. But it's really your way of facilitating the handing off of the practice to an associate as you transition into retirement. Is that what you're trying to achieve? Or on the other hand, if you are building a group practice, are you trying to secure what you might call an anchor doctor? The key business leader, the key clinician in a specific location, that he or she is going to lead that location while you continue to grow the practice, or grow the business, excuse me. So you're trying to secure that and lock down that anchor doctor as you continue to build out your group practice. Those are two different outcomes to achieve, and we kind of think about them differently. So let's talk about a couple of key points here along the way. For one, whether you're trying to facilitate your own retirement or create an anchor doctor scenario, it's important to understand at what life cycle or what stage the particular practice is in. Direct buy-ins are really a good solution for a mature business, meaning a business that's maybe not maxed out, but it's at the peak of value or productivity or efficiency or utilization rate, and there's only maybe marginal further upside in terms of increase in valuation. Arguably, it's not the best option for a de novo practice, a brand new practice where you're coming out of the ground and you're still trying to attract patients. So when you have a de novo type of a practice, that practice is probably valued very low. And arguably, if you did allow somebody to buy in, they'd be buying in at a discount. I see we may have had a couple of questions pop up, and I failed to note this at the beginning, but maybe if you can submit the questions on the Q&A button on your panel, we'll take them all at the end, and I'll try to rifle through them when I'm done with the presentation. So the second thing to consider here is, what are the associate's expectations? If you've never dealt with an associate or had this question or asked them what their expectations are, you need to be prepared for anything and everything. Sometimes their expectations are arguably not grounded in reality, or maybe they're just simply uneducated about this particular topic. So if somebody says, I want to be a partner in your business, what you might want to ask them is, okay, I might be open to that. What are you thinking in terms of percentage ownership? And what are you thinking in terms of dollars that you're probably going to have to borrow to facilitate a buy-in? And you might find that the percentage and the dollar question give you a lot of clarity around where their head's at. If yours is a business valued at $10 million and they want to be your 50-50 partner and they want to take on a $500,000 loan, we got a big gap to bridge. You might also want to ask them how comfortable they are around personal guarantee on future debt. If you are desiring to build a group practice, you're probably going to borrow more money to do that. And if they own more than 20% of the business, they're going to be a guarantor on all of that debt moving forward. And that's something worthy of noting early on. Similar context, what are your expectations? You, being the founder of the business, probably want to maintain control of the practice or the business outright. And control has several different connotations to it from a legal construct standpoint. I'm not going to go deep into legal here, but suffice to say, there are different levels of control in a business that has partnership structure, at least. One is day-to-day decision-making called a manager or managing member or managing partner. There's simple majority, which is 51%, and there's super majority vote, and that has to be defined, and there are criteria around all of that. The second thing might be for you to consider what you want to use the proceeds from their buy-in to do. And this is a real key that not too many people either think about ahead of time, and it can get them into some trouble. So if your idea is to sell $500,000 worth of equity in a practice or your business overall, and you're going to use that $500,000 to diversify your investment portfolio for retirement or otherwise, that may be a good strategy, but your bank might not allow for it. It may be that your bank has a covenant in your loan that says any proceeds from the material buy-in or material change of control of the business must be used to pay down the existing principal of any outstanding loans. And that's a point of, when you're thinking about using the proceeds of the buy-in, you want to find out with clarity what the bank stipulates before you go making any other grand designs on how to use them. There's some people that advocate building a valuable business, selling pieces of it to associates, and then using the buy-in of the associates to sort of be your own bank, meaning take the proceeds of the buy-in and acquire more practices. And again, that might be a possibility, but you want to check with your bank on the existing debt structure first, because that if you violate that covenant, that's going to put you in a world of hurt with your lender. So what is the associate looking to achieve out of this buy-in? Do they want decision-making input in a vote, meaning they want a seat at the table for decision-making purposes? Do they want access to profit distributions? A lot of them do, because they think that owning a business is just like an ATM and we just pull all the available cash out of it. If you don't want to use all the available cash for distributions, you want to reinvest it into the business, which is a very viable strategy, that may be at odds on what their expectations are. Do they think that because now that they're an owner, they can't be fired? That, once they're an owner of a business, they have outright security? Well, that's not actually the case. They can be fired. And do they want to run personal expenses through the business? We call this owner benefit. If they're looking to achieve things like this, and you have other opinions on the way you want to govern the business, you'd hate to be at odds with your new partner on day one. So it's important to be able to talk about these things ahead of time. So let's talk about a couple of best practices on buy-ins. One of the best practices I would recommend is to use an EBITDA-based valuation over traditional methodology of discounted cash flows or percentage of revenue, asset value, and things like that. And the reason for that is, in today's world, if you're building a very valuable business, even if it's a large footprint solo practice, a single location, like maybe 15 to 20 ops or something, it's going to value too highly for any bank-funded young associate to buy the whole thing. So it's probably going to be some type of a group buyer that buys it. And if they use an EBITDA-based valuation, you would want the methodology to be the same. The other thing is, certainly if you're going to build a group yourself, it's going to value as a multiple of EBITDA, so you'd want to be consistent there. So EBITDA-based valuations are probably the way to go. In terms of how much to allow them to buy in, your number is probably 20 to 40% max. And the reason for that is you would like to maintain outright voting control of all the individual practices in your footprint if they are buying in at a practice level and not at a management company level. And that 40% max allows you to maintain at least simple majority voting control. I'd tell you in the 20 to 30% range allows you also potentially to sell an additional stake to somebody down the road. So worthy of consideration on that too. I would tell you to discuss income expectations up front with the associate. And that really revolves around not clinical compensation here, but certainly around how we use distributions in the business. Are we distributing money to owners and liquidating all of it? Or are we keeping some cash on balance sheet? Or are we using some for taxes and some for reinvestment purposes? And if this is part of a larger strategy, you really do want to think through the debt structure, the capital structure, and any covenant restrictions, what the entity structure or structures from a legal construct are, operating agreements, the growth potential of the business. I mentioned profit before as well. So that's buy-in. Let's talk a little bit about earned-in models, because earned-in models are very popular in corporate America. And at Polaris, we have reverse engineered some of the models that my partner DeWalker Sinha and I were privy to in corporate America roles prior to launching Polaris, and made them applicable to group dental practices and for equal effect. The first one I'm going to talk about is something called a profits interest unit, or PIU type of a model. So profits interest units conceptually work really well if you're trying to achieve ownership at a practice level. And this is a scenario where the founder or founders took some initial risk to usually build the practice. These work really great in a de novo scenario. Occasionally it can be an acquisition as well. But the initial risk of the founder or founders creates some threshold of value that the founder created without the associate. The associate is the beneficiary of the risk that the founder took, and all the value or valuation that accrues up to that threshold level accrues to the founder for the risk that they took. If the associate is able to help the founder drive the valuation to a greater level, meaning more profitability, more revenue, more days and hours, more services, if they can help the founder create more value, then they share in it at some level with the founder without actually having to buy into it. On the other hand, if the associate doesn't create any additional value, then they don't earn any equity. So this is really a prove it type of a methodology. And here's a whitewashed example from a client that I've rounded off some numbers just to make things a little bit easier to follow. So the practice has some level of baseline valuation and there's some level of assumed growth in terms of both revenue and EBITDA. In this example, there were 2 founders and this practice has 1 associate in it. The baseline valuation of the business prior to the associate coming in was about $1.8 million, and that's derived from a 6 times EBITDA valuation multiple and a business generating $300,000 in EBITDA. So $300,000 in EBITDA times 6 is $1.8 million. That's the baseline valuation that the 2 founders created without the associate. We modeled this out to show revenue growth of 10% per year and EBITDA margin expansion of 1% per year. We think the business would probably max out at 25% EBITDA and max out at about $6 million in revenue. So this is a business, a practice that when the founders built it and got the boat off the dock, the associate came in at a relatively early stage of the business, and it's a business that has a lot of untapped potential through expanded operatories. This is a model that we show a vesting schedule of 5 years, and then anything above that threshold of value is going to be split a third, and a third, meaning 2/3 accrues to the founders and 1/3 accrues to the associate. So here is an initial table. Don't try to follow all the math in this because these things are pretty complicated, but let's just try to stick to this at a high level here. So the business starts out with an initial threshold evaluation of about $1.8 million. We model these things out over a 10-year run because if the associate wanted to go out and buy their own practice, they'd probably take on a loan for 10 and pay it back over a period of 10 years until they have something they could call their own. So over a 10-year period, the associate helps us mentor new associates, drive more revenue, curtail costs, expand EBITDA, and at the end of 10 years, this is a business going from about $2 million in revenue to a little bit over $5 million, and from about $300,000 in EBITDA to almost $1.3 million in EBITDA. And obviously, over that period of time, they've helped us increase the valuation by almost $6 million. So we could not, the 2 founders could not have achieved that outcome without the associate, but the associate also could not have achieved that same outcome without having to take on a lot of debt and personally guarantee it on their own too. So this is one of those true win-win type scenarios. Once again, here's that initial threshold evaluation for the 2 founders. That baseline evaluation stays the same over a 10-year period. That is the risk that they took and the baseline evaluation that they created. And for the associate, we allocate some number of shares in the business. They vest over a 5-year period, meaning they gradually become theirs. Just because we grant them this opportunity doesn't mean that it's all theirs on year one. We want to attract an associate, but we want to retain them for the long haul. And a vesting schedule is akin to something that you might recognize as being the golden handcuffs. So now they have over a 5-year period fully vested. All of their shares that we allocated to them are theirs. And at the end of a 10-year period, they've created a lot of value in this practice. And when they split it with the founders, they have about a $2 million outcome, according to this growth model that we've shown here. So for the partnership, for the two founders who happen to be brothers, they had an initial valuation each of about $900,000. The associate helped them grow their stakes by about $2 million apiece. Really nice outcome for both of them, almost $2.9 million. And in this case, the associate unlocked about $2 million of valuation for himself or herself as well. And the associate didn't take on any debt or have to personally guarantee any loans to do it. It's all a prove it type of a model that if they can unlock that type of value and a practice with this many operatories, they can do really, really well. But they have to be able to not only just perform the dentistry themselves, but also probably mentor some additional associates along the way. So it's a great type of an outcome that's truly win-win. So the second type of an earned equity model is something called restricted stock units, or RSUs. And these are also really popular in corporate America. I actually was the beneficiary of these during my 15 years at Patterson. So I know how they work. And, I had a fairly nice outcome over that period of time for me in my career. So RSUs are a little bit different from profits interest units. This is, they're not really interchangeable parts, even though both of these are earned equity models. There's the right tool and the right toolbox. The right tool in the toolbox for the right scenario. And RSUs tend to work well when you have associates working in practices, but you have a management company or DSO that sits above those practices. The associate, instead of a practice level goal, has a personal annual collection goal. They earn equity in the business by exceeding that goal. The goal goes up every year, and ultimately the founder or the founders take dilution, meaning they go from owning 100% of the business to something less than 100% of the business, but the business increases in valuation at a faster rate than the dilutive impact. And I'm going to take you through another one of these models here. Again, these are super complicated. I'm not going to go through everything, and don't give yourself a headache trying to follow all the math. Just kind of follow me conceptually with this. And if any of y'all want to take a closer look at any of these things or something, I can debrief with you offline. Okay. So once again, this was taken from a client model that we kind of whitewashed and rounded off some stuff. And the scenario here is that this is an established group practice with a management company or DSO that sits above it. The goal is that they want to add one new practice per year. They want to grow their existing practices revenue by 10% per year, and they want to improve their EBITDA margin in each of those locations by 1% per year. They're going to grow the revenue of the business by 10% and EBITDA by 1%. They're going to grow their existing practices by 6% and 1% respectively. The associate, himself or herself, has a goal of $700,000 in collections. And we're going to increase that goal 5% each year. And for every dollar above the goal, they're going to earn 20% in company shares, company stock, for every dollar above the goal. That's what that top section there indicates. The business is valued at a 6 times EBITDA multiple once again. And in this case, the example doctor, the example associate, starts out with about $800,000 in collections, and that is projected to grow at about an 8% annual clip. Once again, this has a vesting schedule so that whatever they earn in year one doesn't immediately become theirs. And I think this is an important point to stress really quick. When you have an earned equity model, you're going to have some high performing associates exceed the goal and exceed the goal by a lot. And that's a good thing because they're helping you to grow the revenue of the business. And as long as you continue to grow the business profitably, it's a win-win scenario. But just because they exceeded the goal in year one doesn't mean that the entire stock award is theirs. They've got to stick around, in this case for 5 years, for it to vest gradually over that period of time. We never want to create a scenario where somebody earns a lot of equity, spikes the football, and says, thanks a lot, I'm out of here, and you got to buy them out. So a vesting schedule tends to preclude that. So here is this model, and again, whitewashed and rounded off. So the goal of $700,000, the first year they hit $800,000 in collections, meaning they exceeded the goal by $100,000 and they earned $20,000 in company shares. And over a 10-year period, we show their collections growing and maxing out at about $1.5 million. The goal goes up every year as well, tops out at about $1.1 million. And over that 5-year period, we show their equity vesting gradually over 5 years. There's always some amount in this model that is unvested, and that's the disincentive for them to leave you. So they have to think that, wow, I've earned a lot of equity in this business, but if I leave today, I'm walking away from some amount of dollars that they've earned but haven't vested yet. That's the golden handcuff piece, is the unvested shares. When you total that out at the end of 10 years, in this case, it's another, $1.1 million outcome. And this particular associate ends up with projected to own somewhere between 2 and 3% of the entire business. Okay, so it's not, when I said before, think about the percentages versus the dollars on the buy-in construct. This is another one where percentages and dollars are usually dramatically far apart. And we want people to focus on the dollar outcome, not necessarily the percentage. So how do we think about improving the business? Well, we think about improving the business. That's really all about growing the EBITDA margins of the business. And I mentioned this is a business that started out at about 15% EBITDA margins, about 10 million in revenue and $1.5 million in EBITDA. And over a 10-year run, we basically doubled the revenue of the business almost, but we tripled the EBITDA volume of the business from about $1.5 million to somewhere between $4.5 and $5 million at a 25% EBITDA margin. I also said this particular client wanted to add 1 location per year every year over 10 years. So in this case, he wanted to expand the footprint of the business methodically through acquisitions, which would ultimately increase the valuation of the business as well. And this is a model that started out at a business that had 10 million in revenue and about a $9 million valuation. And the way we modeled it out ended up with about 31 million in revenue and a lot more in EBITDA, but a valuation somewhere between 45 and $50 million on the outcome. So if he could execute his growth strategy, and if his associates could come along and do what we're asking of them to take good care of patients and grow their collections, it's going to be a wonderful outcome for everybody involved. And in this case, the founder went from owning 100% of a business valued at about $9 million to being about a 76% ownership stake valued at roughly $36 million. That's a slightly smaller piece of a much bigger, more valuable pie. And if it creates stability through ownership of the associates, now we've got a business that we can really do a lot with, and one that is ultimately arguably easier to govern. So here are a couple of key takeaways here. I started out by saying that building a group practice isn't the right thing for everybody. I believe that it's not. We see a lot of messes candidly out there, and depending on where you are in your time frame and your horizon to retirement, building a group practice might not be the right step, and it might not be worth the risk if you've got, I don't know, 5 years from retirement. But if you're 10 years or more from retiring, I think you need to consider it. And the reason for that is that the industry is going to continue to change a lot, and it's becoming progressively much, much more difficult to operate a solo practice successfully for an extended period of time. And when I say successfully, I mean one that cash flows really well for you and your family. So you don't have to build a 20 location group to be successful. It may be that you find that simply building a 4 to 5 location group practice with no centralization and no management company is the right step. And maybe you have a couple of minority partners through either buy-in or earn-in along the way too. So a couple of key takeaways here. You always want to model out any of these outcomes, whether it's buy-in or earn-in, to understand the debt leverage, free cash flow, and valuation outcomes. If you're going to minimize associate turnover, that comprehensive solution is key, and the 4 components are recruiting, onboarding, and development, ultimately a partnership piece to seal the deal. And if you're going to minimize associate turnover and be more effective in the recruiting game, you got to play the game at a higher level than your peers, and part of that is really differentiating your business from theirs, and an ownership stake can be what you're looking for there. So the first step to getting somewhere is to decide that you're simply not going to stay where you are. And if you're going to build a group practice, you have to have some level of a strategy around attracting and retaining associates. And hopefully tonight's webinar has given you a little bit of a different look into some things that you might not have been able to see or been aware of before. But there are a lot of different associate ownership options in group practices that might not be applicable in a true solo practice context other than a buy-in. But in a group practice, there's certainly a lot of different methodologies to consider. For those that are looking for the CE code for the webinar this evening, you can see it in front of you. It's PERRIN 2023 with a capital P, P-E-R-R-I-N 2023. And for those who like this type of information and want to learn more about it, I'll give you a couple of different options. One, we have a podcast called Group Practice Accelerator that's on all the major outlets. And, we share a lot of these types of wonky business concepts, as I like to say. And we also release a news feed about once a week. I would tell you to subscribe to that to get white papers, blogs, videos, links to the podcast, all that kind of good stuff. You can find all that on our website. And if you're thinking about building a group practice and you literally don't know what you don't know, or you're not sure what's the right next step, or even if group practices are the right thing for you, our Discovery Day sessions are one-on-one sessions with clients that we typically teach out of our Charlotte office, and that might be the right application for you. I teach a good bit of them. My partner, DeWalker, teaches some of them. Mark Flock, our Partnership Pathways consultant that works in a lot of this type of associate equity model scenario, teaches some of them, and we get a lot of nice reviews on them. And the last thing I'll share is that for those that are looking to learn more about this type of a scenario, our friends from CareStack and Darby will be with us and Dr. Mark Costas from the Dental Success Institute in Scottsdale for the 2nd annual Scaling from Clinician to CEO Summit. That's October 11th through 13th, and the QR code is in the lower left section of your screen there. This is really a conference that's meaty in terms of the information like we shared tonight. You can see the agenda on the right-hand side. But really the audience is going to be those that are somewhere between about 1 and 10 locations, and they're looking for the fundamentals of building a group practice. And if you would like to join us, registration is open for that. We do have a number of seats available. So I'd encourage you we do expect it to sell out, so I'd encourage you to enroll in it quickly. And there will be presentations on associate equity, both from a construct standpoint and from a legal structure standpoint. So if this type of stuff excites you, you'll get all of it through a fire hose there. And our next webinar installment in this series is around growth capital. So I think I finished with enough time for a few questions if we have some out there. For those that that joined in late or were not able to download a copy of the presentation, if you'd like to, the QR code is on the left-hand side of the screen there. You can scan that. And if you'd like to dig into anything we went over tonight, you can book a call with me directly off the QR code on the right-hand side. So I'll leave those up for a couple of minutes. And Kelsey, do we have any questions out there or anything? Okay.
We do, yeah. So I'm going to start off with this first one. This is from Grace. She's wondering for an oral surgery office to an oral surgery associate, what do you recommend to offer for percentage of ownership? I know it's kind of a specific question.
Well, so I like to tell people I could answer every question with "it depends," which is true. I'd have to probably spend a little bit more time with Grace and dig into a little bit more things, but here are a couple of things to consider. If it's an associate buy-in at a practice level, that 20 to 40% number is usually the right number. And usually when I say the right number, I mean for the founder. The associate's always going to ask for more because they want to be able to feel like they're in control of their destiny. If you want to build a group practice, what you want to, meaning more than one location, and you are the majority owner of everything, what you want to avoid is a scenario, be it at a practice level or a management company level, where you allow the associates to hold up your ability to govern the business or make decisions the way that you would want to. So if you end up with something like a 50-50 structure in a practice, and Grace owns 10 of them, and she's got a 50% partner in every location, and Grace wants to sell the business one day, and all of her partners say they don't want to, now she may own the largest dollar value of all of it, but she's at loggerheads with all of them, and she's given up her ability to govern the business, to make the decisions that she wants. So there's dollar value impact, and there's voting control and management control. So I'd want to dig a little bit deeper into, hey, how big is the business now? How many locations do you have? How many locations do you want to add? How many associates do you have now? Do they migrate between different locations, or do they stay in one location? There's a lot of different context to dig into that.
Okay, great. Maybe she could book a call with you and go into more detail on that. Perfect. So next question, do you feel like it's more fair to pay based on net productions or collections?
So I think what they're, all right, let me see if I can parse this question a little bit. When we talk about payment, meaning clinical compensation, you can make a good case that net adjusted production is the easiest way to calculate it and the most immediate way to calculate it, where the associate feels like they're not subjected to the collection team's ability to collect. They're just focused on their ability to produce. So from an associate context, in terms of clinical compensation, net adjusted production tends to work well for that. And it shouldn't be that far off from collections other than time value of money. That's on payment, meaning clinical compensation. When we talk about how a business, how earned equity models achieve partnership, it is always based on collection, because collections are what are used to determine the valuation of the business. And as business owners, it doesn't really matter what the net adjusted production is. Collections are what go into the bank account, and that is the way we ultimately run the business and where distributions come from. So I don't know if they meant payment like clinical compensation, or if they were thinking equity based on clinical collections or net adjusted production, but they're different.
Yeah, I think the first one, because it came in like 15 minutes in. So
okay,
that would be my assumption. Okay, great.
Then I just wasted a couple of minutes of time unnecessarily with that, right?
No,
Maybe somebody learned something
you
there
said
too.
that answered it. Thank you. Perfect.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Okay,
Nice.
so let's go. This is the last question that I have. If a potential associate asks for a fixed base salary along with 33% of collections, is this reasonable?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I would, again, it kind of depends. Like, is that, a fixed base salary and 33% of collections above the normalized salary level? Or is that a fixed salary and 33% of collections from $1? That is not reasonable. Okay, so what we typically see is that, again, this is solving for the point of certainty. All of us, whether you're a young associate, a business owner, or anybody in between, we all have fixed expenses at home, right? Whether it's debt payments or kids in private school or whatever, right? And we want to make sure that we can cover our bases on the home front. So I don't have a problem, especially for an associate starting out, on some type of a guarantee or a base salary. But if the clinical compensation rate in your business is 33%, and somebody's asking for, I can't do the math in my head here, but I mean, let's do, instead of 33%, let's say that the clinical compensation rate's 30%, and they want a base salary guarantee of $180,000. $180,000 at a 30% clinical compensation rate is derived from $600,000 worth of collections, right? 600,000 times 30% equals 180. So that's where the two graphs cross. And if you want to guarantee them $180,000 at a 30% clinical compensation rate, that would be fine if you're okay with that for some period of time. And then anything above that, they're going to earn 30% of. So their compensation is never going to drop below 180 for this period of time, but anything above that, they're going to earn 30% of. You would never say the base compensation is $180,000, and every dollar you collect from $1 up to $1,000,000, I'm going to pay you 30% on top of that 180. That would bankrupt the business. So hopefully that's specific enough.
Okay, great. All right, that's all I have for questions. Those are really good. I loved it. Sometimes I don't get any, so this is great.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, these things are, this is a lot of information to cover in a webinar in an hour, but I mean, I hope that people, gain some different perspectives and ways to think about, attracting and retaining associates. This is a huge problem in the space. So hopefully I got some wheels turning. And like I say, if there are people who want to dig deeper into their particular business, happy to spend time with any of them. They can book a call with me, or that's my contact information on the screen there. You can send me an email directly on that. But I certainly appreciate everybody being in tow tonight. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap up and close out here. I just put the code for CE in the chat if anyone wants to grab it really quickly. And everybody have a great night. We'll have this recording emailed out to everyone. Probably by early next week, it will be ready, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel if you'd like to view it there as well. So have a great night. Thank you, Perrin.
You got it. Thanks, Kelsey. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.